Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, dear friends and participants of Busan Democracy Forum 2020. I'd like to welcome all of you to join session 3 of the day 2 of Busan Democracy Forum. My name is Anselmo Lee. I'm a moderator of session 3 as a non-executive member of KOICA. KOICA stands for Korea International Development Corporation. I started this mandate, not full-time, from September this year. Now we have 3 speakers from different parts of the world. And before that, I would like to introduce briefly what is a Busan Democracy Forum. This one is especially for those who are not familiar with the Busan Democracy Forum and also those who are not with us yesterday. We are going to discuss today session 3, session heavy. It's very heavy. Heavy means some topics are maybe not familiar with many of you. That's why I want to introduce short history of Busan Democracy Forum and also main agenda. Can you show PowerPoint, please? As you know, topic of the general theme of Busan Democracy Forum, as you see in the banner behind me, global citizenship education, COVID-19 pandemic, and peaceful, just, inclusive society. 3 keywords. So we use the term global. That means global, local. Busan is one of the cities, big cities, but it's not national capital. So in that sense, we want to link city initiative to global. That's why we use the term global citizenship education. And in terms of SDG, I believe many of you are now familiar with the SDG terminologies. SDG target 4.7, SDG 16, and SDG 17. 17 is about global partnership, including ODA, Official Development Assistance. That's why KOICA is one of the organizers of Busan Democracy Forum. So this is a virtual online, like many other international meetings. I want to show the photo of the real site, not in the online, but where this meeting is taking place. There is a banner outside the meeting room, and then I'm in the sitting in this room. And also this is a setting. So you see the small number of people and the staff with the screen, So I want to show this one so that you can feel something physical, Something is in Busan, although many of you are participating virtually. And then, obviously, we are talking about SDG, Sustainable Development Goal, in the context of decade of action from this year to 2030. And 16 and 4.7, those who are not familiar with the 16 is about peace, justice, and inclusion. And also target 4.7, in short, we say global citizen education, but there are many important elements. Sustainable development, sustainable lifestyle, human rights, gender equality, and culture of peace and non-violence, and cultural diversity, and so on. So sometimes we distinguish global citizen education from target 4.7. Target 4.7 is much more than global citizen education. Or in short, we put all these components in the name of global citizenship. So sometimes, many times we use exchangeably, Sometimes 4.7, sometimes global citizen education in this conference. And also we have a global citizen education, which is an initiative of UNESCO. We have also FCU, one of the speakers at the session 4. FCU is a clearing information house of global citizen education. So this time, session 3 and 4, we are going to present to you all the key actors and what they have been doing about global citizen education, and also in relation to SDG 16 and target 4.7. I showed history of Busan Democracy Forum. As I said, this is a 3rd forum, and first one in 2018, and the second one 2019, but main theme has changed over time. The first one was about democracy. Democracy in SDG 16, these are the main theme. And then from second time, we wanted to focus on democracy SDG 16 in relation to 4.7, global citizen education. And then this year we continue, same theme, but different context, which is a COVID-19 pandemic and also decade of action on SDG. I want to show some photos of 2018-19. Some of you were here with us 2018 and 19. And I want to also share with you news that Lee Mi-kyung, the former president of KOICA, she just completed her mandate last week, 1 week ago. That's why she was not able to with us this time. And then we have now the new president. Hopefully, we will introduce him to you some next meeting. So this is a photo of Lee Mi-kyung delivering her welcome opening remark the last year, and also the panel. So I want to take this opportunity to thank Lee Mi-kyung, president of KOICA, who has been supporting and participating actively in this Busan Democracy Forum. And this is a photo of the participants last year. Traditionally, after intensive session, we used to go exposure tour, different history sites or culture. This is a UN Peace Museum last year. Hopefully next year, when you have this Busan Democracy Forum number 4, some of you can come, we can join this tour again. And short journey of Democracy Forum, starting from Busan. I used to make a joke. There is a famous movie about Train to Busan. That's about zombie. You know? But our topic is a democracy. So democracy from Busan. You know? So after first Busan Democracy Forum, January 2018, and this is a poster and photo. And then next year, we had a Democracy Forum after Busan, but in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, 2018. So this is a follow-up to Busan Democracy Forum, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mongolia, and then the many participants with the UN. It was a big meeting the last year. At the same time, some participants from Japan, they were inspired by Busan initiative, so they organized the Tokyo Democracy Forum last year. Some of us went there from Busan and Seoul. So this was a continuation, starting from Busan, Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, and Tokyo. And then this year again, Kathmandu Democracy Forum, but online, like a Busan. So you can see the starting from Busan. Now we are expanding this Democracy Forum all over Asia. Okay, the technical problem. I can, oh yeah, okay. Now, today's agenda. Yesterday, we had 2 sessions, session 1, session 2. So first, we begin with the ground reality, democratic challenges. So we have the 3 presentations about democratic struggle in Hong Kong and Thailand, and also civic space in India. And then session 2 yesterday, we look at what's happening, the global system education in different countries, Japan, Finland, and South Korea. So this is all about national, local, ground, what's happening on the ground. But today, day 2 is more international and also future. So for session 3, we are going to go deeper into relationship between SDG 16, 17, and Target 4.7, global system education. So based on the sharing yesterday, we are going to deeper and also more international dimension. In the last session 4, we want to develop our perspective and also future action plan. Especially this year, year 2020, was the 75th anniversary of UN. It was a UN General Assembly resolution, declaration, and also civil society engagement with the UN. And also, this year is the starting of the UN Decade of Action to deliver SDGs by 2030. That's why the last session, so we want to, based on our discussion yesterday and today, we are going to have a common action plan as a part of our future strategies. So yesterday there was a guiding questions. Each session has 3 guiding questions. And today also 3 guiding questions. So I want to introduce 3 guiding questions. The first session 3, the first one is COVID-19 pandemic challenges to SDG 4.7 and also 16, because 3 speakers, they've been engaged in the SDG 16 and 4.7 and both. Second question is their organization response to those challenges. The last question is, how can you create a synergy or so-called nexus approach, not silo, the integrated approach on SDG 16 and also 4.7 in the context of COVID-19. So these are the 3 questions. So they are going to make presentations, 20 minutes each, according to the 3 guiding questions. Session 4 questions, I will introduce the next session. And then now, I'd like to introduce 3 speakers. They are already in the Zoom. And first speaker is Hashani Damadasa from New York. And she has been working on SDG 16. The topic is Global Initiative of SDG 16 Plus. Plus means SDG 16 should be the part of overall 17 SDGs. So she will explain a little bit more about why SDG 16 Plus, meaning of plus. So she's speaking from New York, the initiative of Pathfinders. And then second speaker is Cecilia Soriano from Philippines, ASBE, we call ASBE, Asia South Pacific Association for Basic and Adult Education. This is an international NGO working on 4.7 and also 16 in Asia Pacific. Third speaker from Australia, it's a very interesting initiative about positive peace and SDG 16. The Institute for Economic and Peace. She's from Australia, Patricia Garcia. Very interestingly, if you go to Busan UN Peace Museum, you will see the panel session presented by IEP, Global Peace Index. So that is from her organization. Okay, so we are very happy to have 3 speakers from different parts of the world, United States, New York, and Manila, and Sydney. Okay, now can we go back to the Zoom? This is the end of my presentation. Can you show everybody in the screen? So let's present all the speakers to audience before we begin. Sorry, I'm wearing the mask because this is a regulation these days in Busan, but I want to show shortly, take off my mask, show my face, so that this is a face-to-face meeting. Hello. Okay, can you show other speakers in the Zoom so that we can see all in one screen? Okay, there's some technical problems. So be patient. As you know, Zoom meeting, we are not all used to this type of new technologies, so we have to go slow, and soon we'll find a solution to these technical problems. So meanwhile, I'd like to let everybody know that after 20-minute presentation, we are going to take questions from floor. So that means you can write down your questions and comment in the YouTube or Zoom, whatever means available. And then I will take your questions and read for presenters so that they can answer your questions after their presentation. And also I can pick up your questions to put a question directly to them so that hopefully we can make more interactive. So now, Hashani, first speaker is Hashani from New York. Hashani, hello.
Hi, everyone.
Can you hear me?
Hi, everyone.
Yeah,
yes,
hello.
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, I hope we can see you soon. So what time is it now in New York?
It is now 11:14 p.m.
I'm so sorry, 11, okay, midnight.
It's quite late, but I'm very, very happy to be with you all. And it's unfortunate we couldn't be together in person in Busan, but we make do, and it's great to be here virtually.
So I still remember the good time we had together last year. You were here in Busan last year, right?
I remember some of the photos. It was lovely to see those.
Yeah, I hope you can come again next year.
I hope so too.
Okay, so now your topic is SDG 16. You have sent us a PowerPoint presentation. And then before you make a presentation, can you briefly introduce yourself, your organization? You are based in the New York University, right?
Yes, so my organization is called the Pathfinders for Peaceful, Just and Inclusive Societies. We are hosted in New York University Center for International Cooperation. It's a bit long, but the Pathfinders represents a global platform that brings together 38 governments from around the world, as well as over 150 organizations from the World Bank, from UN Women, from grassroots organizations, to businesses, all committed to accelerating implementation for peace, justice, and inclusion targets across the 2030 agenda.
Okay, Hashanik, can you briefly explain to us about the meaning of 16 plus? I mentioned in the introduction. What does it mean by plus, 16 plus?
So it's a great question. And maybe a bit of background history into the 2030 agenda. So as some of you know, and some of the panelists, SDG 16 was one of the most politically fraught goals to be negotiated. It literally got squared in and secured at sort of the Cinderella moment, this midnight hour. That's because it had so much infused around human rights, access to justice, violence prevention, all areas that a lot of governments, as well as partners, were very committed around, but found it very difficult to agree on the. So it wasn't just goal 16, there were targets across the 2030 agenda which reflected the same policy objectives, whether it was violence against children or promoting education, and as in target 4.7, promoting peace through education. So what the Pathfinders created the SDG 16 plus framework, which brought together not just the targets in goal 16, but all the targets across the 2030 agenda that directly mention peace, justice, and inclusion. And there are 36 targets across the agenda.
Okay, thank you for your clear explanation. I hope everybody understands why 16 plus is to avoid a silo, right? In terms of contents, there are many similar targets across the 17 the SDGs. Okay, and also one more question. This is to help participants understand, because sometimes you are all, these are so-called expert panel, and then ordinary people may not be able to follow all our discussion. That's why I want to raise a question from time to time to make sure that everybody understands. The second question is, you said Pathfinder is a multi-stakeholder initiative, right? That means you are based in university, but you are working with many partners, including government and civil society, right?
That's right. So we have 38 governments, which are the founding founding countries of Pathfinders. We also have partners from UN agencies to civil society like Civicus or Namati, as well as financial institutions like the World Bank.
So now you have a PowerPoint, right? Can you show your PowerPoint?
Yes.
And then you can present the main part of your presentation now.
So when I click share, it says host has disabled screen sharing. So I think there's a technology issue here that prevents me from sharing.
We understand, So
I think it may be on your end, actually,
okay,
that prevents me from sharing.
If you want, we can put up PowerPoint from our side. Try first.
It says host disabled screen sharing.
Okay, I think we changed the setting. Maybe you can try again.
Yes. Okay. One second.
Okay, meanwhile, I want to say hello to Patricia and Cecilia. Can you say hello? Can you see me? Yeah, okay, good to see you. So I will introduce one by one when you make a presentation. Sorry, the mask off. Okay, here we go.
So you can all see my screen?
Yes, right, yeah. So we can see.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. So Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's really lovely to meet with all of you. And as Alsamo mentioned, speaking on SDG 16 plus, as well as its connection with Target 4.7 and the importance of building peaceful, just, and inclusive societies. I think it's important for us to be aware of the collective moment we face ourselves in, particularly in light of the pandemic. It's really hard to believe that 1.5 billion children have been affected by school closures due to the pandemic, and 1.8 billion children around the world have faced disrupted services due to the pandemic. And the statistics, I won't go through all of them, but they all relate to a large and growing problem around how children face obstacles to learn safely and in violence-free environments. From age 13 to 15, experiencing bullying with 1 to 3 children. And there are, as Unsama mentioned, it's the year 2020 and there are 10 years left to ensure that all learners acquire the knowledge and skills that are necessary to build peaceful and inclusive societies, which is directly the target of 4.7. But it's also a historic time, as Ansel mentioned. It's a moment where the UN celebrated its 75th birthday, and the UN took an enormous endeavor in reaching out to countries, people around the world to have a global conversation to really understand what are people's hopes, fears, aspirations, and dreams for the future. And some of the key, indicators that came from that consultation are the ones that you see here. That 36% of the people around the world believe violence in the community will get worse by 2045. That armed conflict and political violence ranks as a third priority, an issue that will affect our future. And human rights ranks as a priority in the next 25 years. A lot of these consultations were gathered just before or around when the pandemic was first starting to take its scale. So one can only imagine how these areas have only just exacerbated or heightened. So cognizant that, human rights, violence prevention, injustice in this moment in time are so important. When the 2030 agenda was forged in 2015, as I mentioned earlier, SDG 16 was an incredibly difficult goal for countries and partners to secure. It got negotiated in right at the last moment. And there were a cluster of countries that really championed this initiative to ensure that SDG 16 was a part of the 2030 agenda. And when the 2030 agenda was closed, those cluster of countries recognized that it simply wasn't enough just to have the targets and the goals on a piece of paper, that there needed to be political leadership, momentum, a focus on actions, a focus on evidence and solutions, on strong messaging and narrative to show that possible change was indeed inevitable, if achievable, if countries and organizations work together. And so the Pathfinders was founded on this starting premise to various sectors into a driving platform for action for peace, justice, and inclusion. We first started with 20 organizations in 20 countries in 2016 and have now grown to around 38 member states, as well as over 150 organizations and international partnerships.
Hashani, could you please, which are the countries from? I see the Korean national flag and also yes. Timor-Leste. Can you identify more Asia Pacific countries? I guess Australia there, right?
Australia is here.
Yeah.
Asia Pacific. Indonesia is here.
Indonesia, Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka is South Asia, but yes.
Okay. So there are several countries from Asia. So I'm happy to see some Asian countries a part of Pathfinder. Okay, thank you. Let's move to the next one.
Cool.
Yep.
And as I mentioned, a whole group of organizations that are actively involved in the Pathfinders, some of whom work very closely with Quaker. One of the first foundational steps for the Pathfinders was launching the roadmap for peaceful, just, and inclusive societies. It was first launched on the 72nd session of the General Assembly and updated last year. And it really provides almost a compass for how various countries and communities can work together to demonstrate progress on peace, justice, and inclusion. Not just looking at goal 16, but looking across the 2030 agenda. And why this is so important is, as someone mentioned, is the 2030 agenda was critical in demonstrating the interlinkages across the goals and showing that progress on development requires breaking down the silos. And if we were to look at what achieving peaceful society means, it requires showing progress, not just on various targets of goal 16 that relate to peace, but across targets across the 2030 agenda that directly mention peace, including 4.7, a culture of peace and nonviolence, violence against children, 16.2, safe migration, 10.7, or promoting safe educational facilities, 4.A, safe housing, 11.1. If we take a look at building just societies, again, not just a focus on goal 16, but across the 2030 agenda, discrimination against women and children, 5.1. Again, you see 4.7, education on human rights and gender equality. And then finally, inclusive societies, not just the mention of goal 16 targets, but across the 2030 agenda, again, noting 4.7, the promotion of global citizenship. So once this roadmap was launched, the Pathfinders has more or less worked as a docking station, bringing together countries, organizations to focus on actions. And the way that we do this is across 3 objectives: by driving national implementation, increasing national ambition and reporting. So what is happening at a country level, demonstrating that progress is achievable and measuring that progress. International delivery. This is really building that momentum at an international and regional level, just like this conference here today, providing spaces and opportunities for learning and engagement. And then what we call the 3 grand challenges, providing platforms, almost like campaigns for countries and organizations to drive the agenda forward on specific political priorities. And our bird's eye view as a community, as an SDG 16 plus community, is the SDG Summit 3. This is sort of the halfway mark of the 2030 agenda. It was started in 2015 and it ends in 2030. The SDG Summit in 2023 is a halfway mark. At this point, we must show that a demonstrative progress has been made on the SDG 16 plus targets. And we must also identify areas that are gaps, areas that are lagging, areas that are worthy and necessary and vital for investment in order to achieve the second half of the road to 2030. So as I mentioned, the Pathfinders have created what we call these 3 grand challenges, which activate global platforms or coalitions, high ambition coalitions that bring together governments, civil society, and international organizations. 3 that you see here: halving global violence by 2030. So this is a 50% reduction in all forms of violence. Inequality and exclusion, really tackling the areas which inhibit inclusive growth. And then justice for all, so shifting from a world where justice is only available to a few, to justice systems and justice services that protect all communities. So starting with the Grand Challenge on Justice, this was launched in 2017, and it brought together the governments, the ministers of justice from Argentina, Sierra Leone, and the Netherlands, and brought together a whole community of justice partners from Open Society, the World Bank, the World Justice Project. And one of the key findings of this was that it discovered that 5.1 billion people at any point in time are deprived of justice. And this was a foundational discovery last year. One can only imagine that justice challenges or access to justice has been further compromised because of pandemic. We have recently launched a series of publications and briefs together with UN Women, Namasi, and IDLO, various organizations that perhaps know quite well, which really respond to what are the justice priorities or struggles for people, everyday people, whether it is filing for divorce, whether it is providing rent, making sure that your house isn't taken away because you weren't able to pay your mortgage, various justice challenges, but how courts have been really innovative through technology, either through working through grassroots justice providers, various initiatives and innovations that can really propel not just how we respond to justice challenges now, but even when the pandemic is no longer our everyday existence, how can these innovations really propel in closing that justice gap? Our second grand challenge or coalition brings together a few countries that you see here, including the Republic of Korea, around a cluster of areas in tackling inequality and exclusion. I won't go through this in much length, but they include, for example, inclusive social protection, housing and social exclusion, focusing on civic space, and brings together a whole community of organizations like OECD and Oxfam. And the focus of this coalition is to find politically viable solutions to address inequality and exclusion. So really understanding how governments have worked with communities, with various organizations to really push through very courageous and impactful policies that have been politically viable, not just great as an academic front. And then our most recent campaign is that of halving violence by 2030. So this is, as I said, a 50% reduction of all forms of violence, whether it is violence against children, violence against women, urban violence, or human rights or conflict-related violence. And our major objective is to really ignite a campaign that was very similar to what was done with the MDGs, with ending poverty or halving poverty, is to really build or galvanize a movement that unites various prevention communities that is currently very, very fragmented. When you talk to communities about violence against children or violence against women, it's very hard to talk about common or shared solutions. This again goes to Anselma's point about breaking the silos. Even when it comes to violence prevention, it's very, very, very disconnected. So the ambition for this coalition is to bring the community, violence prevention communities together to talk about shared solutions, shared strategies for how to tackle violence in our lifetime. And one of our key initiatives is peace in our cities. What we've noticed ever so recently, 5 to 10 years, is how city leaders are really stepping up action on the SDGs. And that's ever so much more important now with the pandemic. We're really seeing how mayors and city leaders are really addressing not just the pandemic, but violence prevention and the rise of domestic violence, for instance. And this initiative is specifically focused on a 50% reduction of urban violence by 2030. And this is a growing group of mayors as well as civil society and international organizations, spanning cities from Jordan to Sri Lanka to Mexico to the US to Kenya. And we hope this city group will continue to rise in leadership. And then just most recently, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the pandemic has seen a rise in violence. It's seen a rise of challenges in classrooms. Classrooms are the forefront of the pandemic, either closing or children struggling to learn safely. And even though in this midst of struggle, it's also a critical moment for opportunity. And we're seeing how communities, countries, and various sectors are coming together to show leadership. And one excellent example are two calls to action that were recently issued. One by Pathfinder members, who in their call to action made very specific policy objectives that they said they will commit to in order to tackle violence, injustice, and growing exclusion and inequality, and how they will tackle that together. And then a separate but parallel call to action by civil society and organizations from over 42 countries around the world, who in similar fashion said we stand up for SDG 16+, and provided very, very concrete policy objectives for how they would do that. And I encourage you to both to take a look at this on the site if you have the moment. So before I end, I'll just end by saying that, as Ansama mentioned, we are now in this decade of action. We have 10 years left to achieve the dream and ambition of the 2030 agenda as it was envisioned 5 years ago. And for us, we are in this moment of change and opportunity where we can both address and course correct our direction to achieve those aspirations of the 2030 agenda. And the Pathfinders is focusing upon this in three ways. We are focused and dedicated to building and maintaining that political will, working with the leaders to pursue ambitious and concrete actions to end violence, to tackle inequality and exclusion, particularly for young learners and the challenges that they face with the pandemic and school attendance. For us, it's also about showing new actions and progress and stories and lessons learned. And this is so important to show that progress is indeed achievable. We're in a moment where the trends are in a negative state, and we need to show that progress is possible. And that is important to show that that sense of fatalism can be defeated by stories of hope, stories of progress. And part of the Pathfinders is bringing those stories to an international level. And then our second objective is again driving that country action, as I mentioned, supporting and empowering government and national actors at all levels to ensure that progress in SDG 16+ is country-led and country-inspired. And for us, what we've seen most particularly is with the pandemic, that the importance of integrated multi-sectoral initiatives are so important, that when we're tackling violence against children, for example, so much must not just focus on education sectors, but also health, also justice, and bringing those communities and sectors together is really, really critical. And then also focusing on the hotspots. Where are we seeing incidents of violence, for example, see an uptick, or where are we seeing implementation gaps? We must focus on those hotspots to ensure that no one is left behind in the journey towards 2030. And then objective is really powering a global movement in this time of digital opportunity and this need for connection. We've seen how global campaigns like Black Lives Matter, Me Too, climate change activism has really inspired all generations, from the old to the young, all sectors, from business to civil. We've seen sort of the heartbeat of this moment in time, and we must ensure that peace, justice, and inclusion, SDG 16 plus, remains of global priority in the pandemic era. This is even more important for young learners, and ensuring that they return back safely. And safe also means violence. We also must provide moments to reward progress, to shine a light on innovation, and those global moments, those regional conferences
capacity
are really, really important, like this conference today. And then finally, I think we've all recognized the importance of youth activism, and achieving the dream of 2030 really requires us to focus on listening, empowering, and working with youth, which are truly the generation that will benefit from our progress. So I will end by saying thank you so much, Koika and fellow panelists, and very happy to continue the conversation. And please do follow us on Twitter, as well as visit our website.
Okay, thank you, Hashani. Thank you very much. I think it was a very comprehensive and also clear and a very systematic presentation. I believe that everybody understands, although there are a lot of content, I believe everybody understands very clearly. And also your very impressive graphic and infographic, so thank you very much. I think participants may find it very interesting, including me, because your initiative is not only vertical. Vertical means global, the national, local, but also horizontal, right? Especially in the field of peace, justice, and inclusion. As you know, I've been conducting training about SDG, particularly 16. I use the term PhD, SDG 16, PhD means peace, human rights, democracy, which is another, the word for peace, justice, and inclusion, right? So in this sense, I think the connectivity or intersectionality within SDG 16 and also with other SDGs, I think Pathfinders is one of the perfect platform whether we can make a really connection, for synergy. So thank you for your presentation once again. And also here, as you know, this is a Busan initiative. I hope Busan may find interesting to join this one of the initiative, Peace in Our Cities. Okay, so I will help you to connect to Busan so that next year we can see some more cities from Korea. Is there any member from South Korea, the cities, the part of your initiative?
Unfortunately, no.
Not yet, not yet.
Not yet.
Let's try to make a Busan first one, and then together with
Let's try.
Yeah, all right, thank you very much. So
thank you.
Let's move to the next presentation. Next presentation is Cecilia Thea Soriano. Can I call you Thea? Is your nickname, right? Thea?
Yes, please. Yes.
She is from Nas Bay. You are in now Manila, right? Manila.
Yes, okay. I'm now in Manila.
How is the Manila situation? Still lockdown?
No, the lockdown has been lifted in Metro Manila, but we are allowed to move around, but there are restrictions.
Restrictions.
Yeah, you have to have a mask and a face shield when you go outside, and also there's restriction in terms of the number of people in the office or in the restaurant. So there's a lot of restrictions.
Yeah. So I think you are speaking from home, right, or office? Okay.
I'm speaking from home.
Okay, good. So she's going to speak about SDG target 4.7 and 16. The Nas Bay is a grassroots-based the NGO. So she will tell us about what people are doing, in the face of COVID-19 in terms of the global citizen education. Okay, now we have about 20 minutes. You have also the PowerPoint, right?
Yes, please. I have, Anselmo.
Please.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'm very, very fortunate and happy to be with you all in the Busan Democracy Forum. And we're happy to share what we're doing in our network. But give me a few minutes to show my screen. So, just a few more seconds.
Okay, don't worry, take time. We are learning how to use all the new technologies.
That's right.
You can make it bigger, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So we have been invited several times to the Busan Democracy Forum, and this is our first time to participate as a speaker in the forum, and we're happy that we're able to make it. And I'm, as mentioned by Anselmo, I'm working with ASPE, the Asia South Pacific Association for Basic and Adult Education, and I'm going to focus on a few programs that our members are implementing on SDG 4.7 as it builds on SDG 16 and the other SDGs. My presentation is from practice to policy. Usually we hear about policy to practice, but because I'm starting from the civil society practice, so we do practice and then demonstrate that these practices can be done and scaled up, can be policies and can be scaled up at the national level. So that is our work within Nas Bay, making sure that the practices that we do translates to a national level or even international level policy. And that's why our relationship with our members at the country level is very important. So just a short background on Nas Bay. We are a civil society network of 200 organizations and individuals. We have national education coalitions in our network, and we are present in 30 countries. And we have members from South Asia, Southeast Asia, South Pacific, which includes Australia. So Patricia, we have a member in Australia. And in East Asia, we have members in Japan, Mongolia, China, and Korea. And then recently, in the past few years, we have an increase in numbers of members in Central Asia. So now we have decided that with the number of Central Asian countries, we have formed Central Asia as another sub-region for the organization. So as I mentioned, I'm going to present with you the practices from ASBE members, and I'm very happy that Harshani provided the overall framework, and these are practices that we are doing within that overall framework. There's a lot of interventions that we have been doing around COVID-19, but I'm going to focus on 4. So one is on gender responsive disaster response. And this framework has been generated by our member in Indonesia way back before the pandemic. But it would be good to look at it as a framework for proceeding with the pandemic response. And we have learned so much from this framework in doing our own country level work. And then of course, I'm going to share the applied digital literacy from India, the positive discipline trainings and engagements in the Philippines. And then I will end with the youth-led action research done by young people from marginalized communities during COVID-19. This is done from April to August of this year by young people from marginalized communities. So let me start with the gender-responsive lifelong learning framework in emergency crisis. And as I mentioned, this is a framework generated by our member from Indonesia, Female-Headed Household Empowerment Program, or PACA in Indonesia. As we know, in Indonesia, they have a lot of disasters. They have typhoons, tsunami, volcanic eruption, earthquakes. And with the intense disasters in Indonesia, the civil society organizations, they always have to respond, especially in marginalized communities. Now, any disaster creates multidimensional conflicts in the community, and therefore any disaster should be seen within the SDG 16 lens. It's not only providing humanitarian response, which is the first step that we do, emergency response. But because of the insecurities, the lack of food, lack of shelter, lack of resources, and even a lot of gender violence, then the peace building should be integrated in the humanitarian response. And for PACA, it is also important to look also at the gender responses, because men and women, boys and girls, they have specific needs when it comes to the emergency response. So what PACA does is to have a gender checklist where they look at the needs of women and men, boys and girls. They also look at the inclusion, participation of all in the decision making in the emergency response, especially looking at community responses and not only being driven by international responses. And after the emergency response, as we know, it's important to move towards reconstruction and rehabilitation. And in this process, community participation, making sure that women are participating, because in Indonesia, women are not allowed to have also their own land titles. So this has become a debate in reconstruction and rehabilitation, because it's only the males or the men who are entitled to land titles. And when the tsunami hit in Indonesia, female-headed households were left without land to build their houses on. So this is an issue that has to be, that's why PACA has been working on a gender responsive and gender just reconstruction and rehabilitation. And then this framework also says that whatever reconstruction and rehabilitation we do should be integrated and sustained. And therefore, PACA works around policy and program development with the government, going into the prevention and anticipation, making sure that there is disaster risk reduction and management at the community level. There are policies, enabling policies at the national level. And of course, there is financing provided by the government in all of these 4 stages. So our members learned so much from this gender responsive lifelong learning framework in emergency crisis of PACA, making sure that education, interaction, knowledge building, documentation is part of the humanitarian response and reconstruction. So now I go to another program undertaken by our member in India. And this is in response not only to the need for information during the pandemic, but also importantly, the need to address the gender violence, increasing gender violence happening in India and also in other parts of South Asia. Nirantar in India, when the pandemic hit, they have been working with women illiterates before the pandemic. And when the pandemic hit, the main problem is how do women from marginalized communities get access to information when everything is online? They're not able to go out of their houses. They're not able to communicate with their women organizations. So, and there's a lot of gender violence happening at home because of the tensions created by the pandemic. And of course, because of patriarchy. Now, Nirantar working on women, they immediately put together a digital app, which is called Applied Digital Literacy, or AppDil. Let me just move this one. Applied Digital Literacy, or AppDil. What this AppDil contains? It contains information on basic literacy, numeracy skills. It also provided information on dairy cooperative, because a lot of their women are working with the dairy industry. It also included information on leadership building. What can you do during the pandemic? Who to contact? Which government agency is providing relief and support? And how can women work together to get access to this relief? So these are some of the information provided in the AppDil. There are also audiovisual aids as part of the training learning materials prepared by women and Nirantar based on the needs and experiences of women in marginalized communities. And with the use of AppDil, the women are also exposed to a pedagogy where they build their confidence to use their technology. Women from marginalized communities do not have access to mobile or internet, but even mobile, is really a challenge for them. But so what happened is that when they learned about AppDil, the women were encouraged to buy their own mobile. They had to negotiate with their family, I need to have my own mobile phone. But anyway, AppDil is very important because it provides technical skills and knowledge, but with a gender perspective, because as we know, technology is not neutral. This is something that we must shape for our needs and shape based on a gender perspective. So that is what Nirantar is doing. So as I mentioned, so what are the impact of AppDeal? So teachers and women bought basic mobile phones. So as I mentioned, they were encouraged because in this case, the knowledge led to access. They were so excited to try their own, their own way of using AppDeal, that they negotiated with the family that they need to have the mobile phone. And women started using this mobile phone to get information about livelihoods, what they can do in terms of products. So it enabled them to strengthen their livelihoods and opportunities for getting connected. It also enabled them to get, as I mentioned, access to over their devices and negotiated mobility. Because during the pandemic, they don't know where to go. But because of the information provided through AppDeal, the women now know, where to go, where do I get relief, who to talk with, and how to get social protection. And for the teachers, of course, they were able to connect with their students, and they had a session with the learners, and the learners shared their experiences regarding burden of work. Many of the students, even young and children, they have been burdened with work, having stayed at home during the pandemic. And even in Mongolia, the children and the young students were saying that with the TV, they cannot focus their attention on the studies because they have to do domestic work. So that is what happened to the students when they stayed at home. And of course, the online forums provided by AppDeal made, facilitated the exchanges across teachers and built their capacities, learning from each other how to use the online education technology, so on and so forth.
Thea, sorry, but I want to be a bit more cautious of time. You spend more than 10 minutes. Okay. You have many more slides, right? So
yes.
Please,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. So just one more on the AppDeal. It was able, through a coalition of 7 organizations, AppDeal and digital literacy was able to connect to over 160,000 families through online and offline platforms. And they were able to connect women and girls in the field through WhatsApp and video calls. And through this digital literacy, the communities were able to have exchanges and deal with their tensions like gender violence and discrimination. But because we know this is still a problem, but at least it facilitated exchanges on these issues. So one more, because of the time, I would just like to say that positive discipline, so this is the initiative in the Philippines, and this in the Philippines has been doing positive discipline towards culture of peace before the pandemic. And what they have done, they have been doing this positive discipline training in schools and in communities since 2012. And through their experience, they have produced a primer for Filipino teachers on positive discipline. They also connected with the local government units by working with the child protection community. So it's not only learning that they did in the community, but to enable child protection, they also work with the local governments, because there are so many policies and legislations in the Philippines that protect the children, but these are not really implemented because the local government units, mayors and government officials themselves, they do not know about these child protection policies. So how can they implement that? So they also work with the Office of Civil Defense when it comes to child abuse. So this is like the strategy of ENET Philippines. So you can see the interconnection of their work in the education sector and also in the other sectors within the community. So as we mentioned, when working for SDG 4.7 and SDG 16, it has to be intersectoral, interagency, intergovernmental. So what have they done during the pandemic? Because we know that violence increased so much during the pandemic. So ENET started with their positive discipline and community engagements during the pandemic. They worked with 4 provinces, 10 schools, 200 teachers and 200 parents, including youth mentors, in ensuring that there is positive discipline even during the time of the pandemic and even when the schools are closed. So you can see in the picture some of the meetings and some of the online trainings conducted by ENET Philippines. So now this is to my last slide. And so we see from practice to policy, and we have learned so many lessons and policy recommendations from our practice. And we say that SDG 4.7 should be integrated in SDG 16 and the other SDGs. SDG 4.7 should be aligned. It should, and one of the recommendations under SDG 4.7 is really institutionalize awareness raising. SDG 4.7 is not a project. It should be institutionalized. Different stakeholders should be enabled to participate. And we already mentioned multi-stakeholder, intersectoral. Curriculum development should be inclusive. It should go beyond the education, the school system. We say that it extends from the school to the community and vice versa. And lastly, we should harness the youth energies and their knowledge in SDG 4.7. And with this, I would like to share with you the short video that we have prepared. This is the youth-led action research of young people conducted during the pandemic. So thank you so much. And this is, the video is my last slide.
Okay, thank you, Tia. You are going to show the video, right? Video clip?
Okay, so I can do that. Yes, I can do the video.
How long is the video clip?
It's only, 3 minutes.
Okay, let's 3 minutes. I think they give us the feeling, what's really happening on the ground, how people respond creatively, So let's see video clips.
Yes.
Before pandemic, International Labour Organization reported that almost half of these young people are jobless. Current pandemic has aggravated the situation. Many young people from marginalized communities are facing severe challenges. They have lost their income and face difficulties in accessing social protection and relief assistance.
Yung pagkain sa araw-araw, lalo na hindi na yung sa lugar namin hindi na bibigyan ng relief goods, walang dumarating galing sa barangay.
Makanya sudah betul-betul sama sekali tidak ada mau alternatif lain juga sudah dipikir, tapi memang betul-betul karena dilarang di шаардлагатай төсөлтөд дэмжлэг үзүүлэхгүй байгаа нь харагдсан. За үүний тод жишээ бол залуу хүмүүс ажлынхаа цомготголд орчихсан. Үүнээс болоод өрхийн сарын орлого нь байхгүй болж банк санхүүгийн байгууллага хашаа байшин өөрийн эд хөрөнгөө барьцаасан байсан. Тэд нар бүгд алдаж өдөр хоногийнхоо хоолыг аргацааж байгаа. Энэ дүр зураг бол бидний өмнө их харагдсан. सरकारने ऑनलाईन शिक्षण सुरू करण्याचं ठरवलेलं आहे. पण गावाकडे प्रॉब्लेम हा आहे की तिकडे अजिबात फोन सुद्धा करायला रेंज नसते, तर ऑनलाईन शिक्षण होणं तर शक्यच नाहीये. कमी लोकांनीच मिळून लग्न करायचं आणि कमी खर्चात लग्न करायचं. त्याच्यामुळे मग मुलींचे पालक पण लवकर म्हणजे खर्च कमी व्हावा याच्यासाठी मुलींचे पटापट लग्न करतात. Social media बस र कोही चाहिँ एकअर्कामा अट्र्याक्सन भइसकेपछि चाहिँ सानै उमेरमा इन्जोय गर्ने যেমন তাছাড়া আমাদের বিকাশের প্রবলেম হয়েছে কারণ যেহেতু আমরা বাইরে যেতে পারতেছিলাম আমাদের
Okay, thank you very much. Well done. I think it's very touching stories from the ground. I think these are real people's life and their struggle. They remind me of the, these days the famous song "Life Goes On." This is a BTS album. This is real life goes on the ground. So thank you for reminding us ground reality. This is the reason that we are having this conference together to how to change, how to make a positive impact on the ground. Okay, thank you once again. So let's move to the next one. As we see, the first one is a more global framework, and the second one is a real struggle on the ground. So how to connect these two, global, national, and local. But now third intervention is from the positive peace perspective, as I introduced, and becoming very popular in Asia, so also in South Korea as well. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to learn about how to apply this positive peace in the context of COVID-19 in relation to SDG target 47 and then 16. Patricia, you are speaking from Sydney, right? Australia. How is your micro on, please? But yes.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, you are speaking from Sydney now, right?
Yes, that's right.
How is Sydney lockdown now, or you can move around?
We are not in lockdown, and fortunately we are able to move around. We've had quite a lot of restrictions lifted, and I think many of us are very much looking forward to being able to travel around our country, which has been under heavy restrictions with borders closed between different states for several months.
Okay, so it's the beginning of summer, right? Here is the beginning of winter.
That's right. It's a very warm day today, actually, at Selmo. It's about 26 degrees to 28 degrees today. So a very warm start for our summer.
Yes, because we are very afraid of, the third wave of pandemic here in South Korea because of the winter, Winter makes things worse, So you are summer, so we are jealous of you, You have better situation in terms of weather, Okay, thank you for once again participating. So now we have about 20 minutes. You have also PowerPoint, right? Please go ahead. Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Anselmo, and thank you very much. It's a great, well, it's actually a privilege and a great pleasure to be invited to participate in the Busan Democracy Forum. My name is Patricia Garcia. I am the Partnership Development Manager at Institute for Economics and Peace. And Institute for Economics and Peace is an independent, non-partisan, not-for-profit think tank that is dedicated to shifting the world's focus on peace to a positive, tangible, and achievable measure of human well-being and development. And we aim to develop new conceptual frameworks of defining peacefulness, providing metrics that measure peace, and to create a better understanding of the socio-cultural, economic, and political factors that drive peace. Since 2016, IEP has also been engaged in in-country programmatic activities to deliver positive peace workshops. We also conduct an IEP Ambassadors Program, which is a core activity of our peace education programming. And this IEP Ambassadors Program is an online training program that equips learners with the knowledge of IEP's research, methodologies, and tools so that they can apply this knowledge to execute projects that promote peace within their communities and organizations. Many of you might know that IEP pioneered the empirical study of peace, and most notably through the groundbreaking Global Peace Index, which measures the absence of violence or the fear of violence in 163 countries, which represents 99.7% of the world's total population. As well as this Global Peace Index, IEP has also developed the Positive Peace Framework, which is a set of interrelated factors, or what we call pillars. And these 8 pillars of positive peace are really if you like, key to be able to track and support the measures that drive peace. And I'll talk a little bit more about the positive peace framework later on. I'd just like to mention some of the key products and services that we provide, and as well as the Global Peace Index, which I mentioned earlier. We have the Positive Peace Index, which, as I mentioned, through the Positive Peace framework. And I think of interest for this session, last year, IEP produced 2 reports, and one of them, I'll just hold it up here, is the SDG 16 Plus Progress Report, and also the SDG 16 in the Pacific region report. These 2 reports were presented at the high-level political forum on SDG 16 Plus at the UN in New York in July last year. And our most recent new report that has just come out a couple of months ago is our Ecological Threat Register. This report, this Ecological Threat Register analyzes a country's risk from population growth, water stress, food insecurity, rising temperatures, natural disasters, and sea level rise. And we aim through this report to show a nation's exposure to ecological risks. And this report contains tools to show the links between peace, climate, and ecological risks, and also provide some opportunities for interventions to deal with this. So all our reports are available on IEP's website, visionofhumanity.org, where we provide all our reports and publications online.
Patricia, the website name once again, Vision for Humanity, right?
Yes, our reports and publications are all on our website, which is called Vision of Humanity.
Visionofhumanity.org.
Visionofhumanity.org.
Okay. Patricia, you have a PowerPoint, right? You can use your PowerPoint.
I can start now.
Yeah, okay. These are the excellent reports. So we can use this one for our advocacy activities. Okay, so now PowerPoint.
Just
yeah, so we can see now. You can
make that on full screen.
We can click the bottom.
Full screen.
Yeah, full screen.
Full screen. Where are we?
I think the bottom.
Bottom. Yes.
Move your cursor to the bottom. There is a
full screen. I can't seem to see where it is now.
Bottom of your screen.
Yes.
There is a few icons. Oh, never mind. Still we can see. No problem. You can.
Now you share?
No, it's okay. It's okay. If you cannot find, please go ahead with this one. We can watch. It's big enough. Big enough.
Where's the full screen? No. Full screen. Okay. Can you all see that?
Yes. Okay.
Sorry, just I want to take a, sorry about the delay. Just suddenly sorry about this. Just wanting to show that the slide there, SDG tree, I use the concept of the tree for the SDGs as we know, because I wanted to get to people to understand that the SDG represents a system, and as a system, then we must understand the importance that as a system we have a lots of interconnectedness that occurs in a system. You have internal, external factors, you have inputs, you have feedback loops, you have pathways, and the SDGs, all of the SDG 17s together actually form a system. And as we can see, I put it as a tree because it is a dynamic. It is not a static system or a static concept. It is actually something that is always moving and dynamic, and that is the reason why we always work in a form of working in transformation, because the whole idea about the SDGs is that we are trying to transform our world for a better future, and that transformational approach is actually integral to all the actions and solutions and collaborations that we are doing. So it's looking at SDGs as a system. I just wanted to go back to emphasize the underlying 3 principles of the SDGs agenda, being firstly, with the 17 interrelated goals and 169 targets, it is about the 5 Ps: people, peace, planet, prosperity, and partnership. And also that we have 3 principles underlying the SDGs agenda, which is universality, that all the goals and are universal, they belong to everyone, and they are for everyone. And the second importance is the interconnectedness, or sometimes we say interconnectivity of the goals. And this, in many ways, for people who work in the education field, is a very important concept, because the notion of interconnectivity in relation to the SDG agenda requires transdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary thinking and practice. And this is one of the things that is, I think, an important area in how we are being able to look at the nexus between SDG 4.7 and SDG 16+. The other key principle underlying the SDGs is the leave no one behind principle. And again, emphasizing the importance about social inclusion and the fact that the goals are underrooted by human rights norms and principles. And for this reason, we want to also create a reason for hope, particularly for the young generation and future generation, that we are able to show that this agenda will make sure that we will leave no one behind. So it gives us a reason for hope in terms of being able to apply this principle. I think the SDG 4.7 has already been mentioned in the previous presentations, so I don't want to repeat that, but what I wanted to show is just highlight, particularly for the relationship for IEP, is that in the target 4.7, which is a related goal, of course, to SDG 16, is the mention of not only global citizenship, education for sustainable development, human rights, gender equality, but also the promotion of culture of peace and nonviolence, which is a key area of the work that IEP particularly has a very, very strong interest in. And we do our best, as I explained earlier and mentioned, in our peace education activities, such as our positive peace workshops, our IEP ambassador program, and many of the other research education materials and resources we provide, is very much connected to wanting to promote a culture of peace and nonviolence. And then we also have the important theme of cultural diversity, which is promoting inclusion and diversity and social cohesion in society. So these are, to me, just wanting to identify these key the key areas of focus in SDG 4.7, because for me, they are very much connected. And for example, the issue of culture is running through this whole theme. And we have to look at culture not as we have to look at culture as the word cultivate. It comes from the word cultivate as a verb, and it is about planting a seed or planting a tree and watching it grow and being able to provide the resources that a plant needs or a tree needs to grow. And the word cultivate is very, very important here, because we need to be in a position to understand that these concepts we are talking about, whether it's human rights, whether it's global citizenship, sustainable, they are all dynamic, organic concepts. They are subject to change, and these are the culture of this is an important theme to be able to educate people about these concepts. SDG 16, as I mentioned before, I thought one of the things I'd like to mention about the actual SDG 16 for IEP, this was an important milestone, because many of you would have remembered that of all the goals, the last goal to be accepted as part of the 17 goals was SDG 16. And that was because, as you all know, in the Millennium Development Goals, there was no peace goal. So it took quite a lot of discussion and negotiation to have included SDG 16. And IEP had some influence in the inclusion of SDG 16, because the measures that we have in our Global Peace Index and our Positive Peace Index are also included in the 12 targets of SDG 16. So we feel that this was an important milestone for us, that we were able to have an influence in the inclusion of SDG 16 in the SDG agenda. Just very quickly, the COVID-19 and progress on SDGs, as has been mentioned before, the impact of COVID has had severe negative impacts on most SDGs. And we can now see that we need to have some very, very important transformations that we urgently need to address to be able to recover from the COVID-19 outbreak. And in some regions, there has been significant progress on SDGs despite the COVID pandemic. And we have seen that Asian countries have progressed most on SDGs since 2015. And also Asian countries have also responded most effectively to COVID-19 outbreak. I mentioned on the current Sdg Index ranking that Korea is ranked 20 out of 166, and I think this is a very, very good ranking and score for Korea for this year. My country, Australia, has actually been going down and has not showed progress on the SDG ranking. In fact, this year we're ranked 37, and last year we were 38, and we have dropped from 2015, where we were ranked 17, right down to now, where we are now at 37. So that's a drop of 20 points. So I don't really want to say too much other than Australia has not really shown progress in relative to many of our Asian neighbors. The transformations, I just wanted to mention the 6 transformations that have been mentioned in the SDG 2020 report as ones that will hopefully be able to accelerate the SDG 2030 agenda, include transforming the education, gender inequality area, which is what we are going to be talking about today in our session, health, well-being, demography, energy, decarbonization, sustainable industry, sustainable food, land, water and oceans, sustainable cities and communities, and digital revolution for sustainable development. These are the 6 priority transformations that are being encouraged for countries and communities to accelerate to be able to achieve the SDGs by 2030. I want to talk about how the mainstreaming of the culture of peace and nonviolence, global citizenship, education for sustainable development, including gender equality and human rights, which I mentioned are the core themes in SDG 47, how we could mainstream all of these at all levels, because that actually is the action transformation that we need to be able to create if we are going to move from words to action, and if we want to accelerate actions and solutions and collaboration. SDG 16 as a catalyst for development, as many know, we cannot have peace without development, and we cannot have development without peace. So hence, that is why in this SDG 4.7, we are actually including the peace and development nexus very closely together. And that's why it is important that we can mainstream this peace and development concept through all levels, whether it is national government level, regional level, or local level. The SDG 16, I would like to just say that Harshani, I used to work with the United Nations Association of Australia, where I participated in quite a lot of conferences that involved pathfinders. So I'm here wanting to show that we also want to support SDG 17 and work in partnership and collaboration. And wherever we can, we try to promote a lot of the work that Pathfinders is doing, because as working with SDG 16+, we are also wanting to contribute in a way that we are also working in partnership by implementing SDG 17. And the peaceful societies, just societies, inclusive societies, are the key areas as we in IEP also look at. And if you look at our competencies that we require to look at these three areas, if we look at peaceful societies, for example, reduce violence and insecurity, or promote rights, justice, rule of law, or good governance and inclusion, we not only need to look at these concrete, if you like, technical ideas, we also need to look at what we call the soft skills. And in the soft skills, I talk about the importance of competencies that we need to be able to educate people and learners about the importance about empathy, shared universal values, conflict resolution, ability to communicate and collaborate with others, a sense and security of identity, respect for diversity, intercultural understanding, and recognition of global issues, interconnectedness, and the importance in that area, for example, the importance of international cooperation like ODA. I'd now like to talk more about IEP's positive peace framework, which I mentioned before. Positive peace, as defined by IEP, represents the attitudes, institutions, and structures that create and sustain peaceful societies. Here we have the 8 pillars, and as you can see, the 8 pillars are all interconnected. Just like the SDGs at 17 are interconnected, with our 8 pillars of positive peace, they are also all interconnected, and each one affects each other, and they also can be in a way, can be able to have positive benefits for each other by supporting each other. So those 8 pillars are well-functioning government, equitable distribution of resources, free flow of information, good relations with neighbours, high level of human capital, acceptance of the rights of others, low level of corruption, and sound business environment. If you look at those 8 pillars, when we actually go down to looking at the breakdown of those 8 pillars, you will see a direct correlation with the SDG Goal 16 12 targets. And I hope you will be able then to see why IEP's positive peace framework can be used to be able to have the data you need to address the targets in SDG 16. The IEP Positive Peace Framework also provides a common language to be able to engage different stakeholders, whether you're from government, whether you're from private sector, whether you're working with NGOs, to be able to have a common language to look at how you could address SDG 16 through this Positive Peace Framework. The Positive Peace Framework also supports a whole of systems approach. We are introducing here again the systems thinking. And it's an integrated way of looking at problems and also finding solutions in a more integrated or what we call a whole of systems approach. When we say whole of system, we say the whole of the system is greater than the sum of the individual parts. And I hope that makes sense to many of you who can see how those who understand systems theory can see the link and how we could use this framework as a way of having a common language to bring people of different sectors, different backgrounds together to talk about peace. I thought I'd just give some examples of how IEP has been able to measure positive peace in different countries. And I thought I'd give some examples of this through the positive peace in South Korea. South Korea is currently ranked 24 in the Positive Peace Index of 2019.
Patricia, can you,
Yes?
some of you, we have only 10 minutes left for Q&A and discussion. Maybe you can summarize in the less than 1 minute about South Korea.
Oh, all right. Then I'll just go through this very quickly. And then in Asia Pacific region, South Korea ranks a 5th highest positive peace country behind New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, and Japan. And I think the most important thing is that the top performing pillar of positive peace over the past decade was sound business environment, followed by free flow of information. This underpins a strong economic and technological development in South Korea. However, as with the global trends, there was a deterioration in the level of corruption in the country. I give another example in India of the positive peace ranking and score in India. India has been ranked 92 in the Positive Peace Index of 2019, placing the country in the high peace category. In the South Asia region, India ranks 3rd highest positive peace country behind Bhutan and Sri Lanka. India's positive peace score again was in 2019 3.25, and this represents a 3.3 improvement over the past decade. The top performing pillar of positive peace for India was sound business environment, followed by low levels of corruption. This underpins the strong economic and technological development in the country, in contrast to the global trends. The pillar low level of corruption improved in India over the past decade, albeit from a low base. Then I'll just take the last country, Thailand. Observations on positive peace ranking and score in Thailand. Thailand is ranked 77th in the Positive Peace Index, placing the country in the high peace category. In the Asia Pacific region, Thailand ranks 10th highest positive peace country. Again, the top performing pillar of positive peace over the past decade was high level of human capital, followed by sound business environment. This reflects the economic and technological development in the country, and also they had very strong tourism, economic and technological performance. And again, there was a deterioration in the low levels of corruption. So I think I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you, Patricia, for your very comprehensive presentation, which helps us a lot to understand goal 4.716 from positive peace perspective. With this presentation, I would like to pose common questions for all of you. You know, you are speaking about 4.7 and 16 from different perspectives. One is global, grassroots, and also research and advocacy networking point of view. But common question is, as Dia mentioned, there are two. One is a nexus approach. That means linking actually 16 to 4.7. Obviously, you can see peace and human rights, both 16 and 4.7. right? In terms of education. But now question is, as they are mentioned, how to mainstream, mainstream the 16 and 4.7 in the all SDGs. As Patricia mentioned, you said whole of system, because according to the UN terminologies or proposals, there is a concept of whole of government approach and whole of society approach. And now we are adding whole of SDG approach, so-called triple approach, whole of government, whole of society, and whole of SDG, which means mainstreaming the 16 and 17. So my question to all of you, so based on your presentation and also experience, how we can work together to mainstream the 4.7 and 16 into whether you work peace, whether you work people, planet, and prosperity, this 4.7 and 16, So maybe 1 or 2 minutes, maybe you can summarize part of the already you mentioned in your presentation, but in terms of the bringing all different perspectives together as a concluding remark, because the time constraint, I'd like to invite who wants to speak. Maybe Hashani first, from your own experience, how we can work more creatively to mainstream 4.7 and 16.
So it's just 4 areas. I think one, there's an opportunity now with classrooms being the spotlight for how we recover back efficiently, fairly, and equitably. Classrooms are on sort of the epicenter of the pandemic battle for how we build back better. And a lot of recovery strategies are focusing on how schools return safely. But there's also an opportunity to infuse that with classrooms being violence-free, being sites for promoting inclusive education, inclusive and fair and violence-free settings. And I think, as some of the panelists have mentioned, it's working hand in hand across various sectors, not just education or health, but how, whether it's justice, whether it's child protection, how those policies are integrated in recovery strategies, and how children are able to learn, how learners are able to have safe and violence-free environments. I think the other aspect has already been mentioned, is the importance of youth, how youth are agents of change and defining the solutions that work for them, that benefit their communities, that they are part of the solution. And we're seeing that arise even with the UN 75 processes, how youth are really active in that. And the third area I would say was, the Inspire strategies that UNICEF have launched for how to tackle and really end violence against children are really informative. Whether it is, building norms and values, parent and caregiver support, income and economic strengthening, the various strategies that infuse the UNICEF Inspire strategies are really, really pivotal for how we tackle violence against children. And then finally, I think something that's really, really resonated is that, the message of hope and showing that progress is achievable. We're in this really sort of critical moment where trends are declining, there's been an uptick of violence, but we need to show what are the evidence-based solutions, what are the viable solutions that can really, really make a difference and bring children, youth, teachers, parents, governments, local leaders to be part of that sort of choir for change. And we need to keep that momentum up, because political will can dissipate so quickly. So these global moments, regional opportunities like this conference are really important.
Okay, thank you, Ashani. Cecilia, Tia?
Yes, thank you, Anselmo. When we refer to SDG 4.7, we always say SDG 4.7 in action, because if you look at the SDG 4.7 indicator, for example, it says mainstreaming SDG 4.7 in the curriculum in schools. But as I mentioned earlier, for SDG 4.7 to be integrated in SDG 16 and other SDGs, it has to go beyond the schools. And therefore, we are pushing for education systems reform in many countries, the schools are the main providers of education. But we say when we talk about SDG 4.7, it includes a whole lifelong learning education system. So your school, your community learning centers, your cafes, your learning hubs, and community learning centers. So that is very important. Secondly, these education systems, lifelong learning, should be financed by government, because we have seen how the governments are putting all their resources in the schools. But our experience with marginalized communities, where there is a lot of conflict and where peace building is very important, there's a lot of gender violence. Marginalized communities don't have access to these schools. So therefore, governments must finance community learning centers so that we are able to have that dialogue through SDG 4.7. And thirdly, we also say that SDG 4.7 is not only talking about peace, it's also understanding, recognizing that there are a lot of frameworks out there. And therefore, we say we should recognize indigenous knowledge on peace building. We should recognize local wisdom when it comes to environment protection. We should recognize the youth perspectives, their creativity and innovativeness. So SDG 4.7 is recognizing different knowledge systems. And that is the only way, that we can have diversity and respect. And it's not only a top-down education, but really something experiential and dialogical. So those are my 3 bits in terms of SDG 4.7. And then, of course, the role of the government is very important, because we have to, scale this up, not only in specific communities, but in all communities all over the world. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Cecilia. Very important 3 main takeaways from your presentation. Okay, now Patricia.
I mentioned about the importance of how we could bridge IEP's research and bridge it to action and bridge it to practice. And this is one of the actual aims of IEP, particularly working in the partnership section of the organization. We are engaged with collaborating and partnering as what we do, forming strategic partners with all different sectors in the community. And in particular, because of our work on peace education, such as through our Positive Peace workshops, our IEP Ambassadors program, we are constantly in touch with formal education institutions, as well as non-formal education and informal education. And I think this is an important area, as was mentioned earlier, about we should also include, particularly in communities that are in conflict-affected settings, where there often is no formal education structures, and the community has to rely on informal and non-formal education. And this is an opportunity for us to be able to extend the ability to expand the different types of knowledge and learnings we need to be able to include if we are going to be able to provide this global citizenship concept, as well as the concept of understanding about sustainable development and peace. And I think fundamentally understanding that the role of inclusion and diversity needs to be part of being able to have people participate. And if we don't engage with all different communities so that we don't leave anyone behind, we're not actually being able to achieve this global citizenship or this global sustainable development agenda, because we're not including particularly those people that have been particularly marginalized or not even being visible or being counted. And I include women in this, because the gender equality issue is a very, very key aspect of that. And in most conflict-affected countries, the predominant communities are the population is predominantly dominated by women and children. And also, we have this very important Women, Peace and Security agenda of the UN, which we are celebrating now the 20-year anniversary. And this is showing that there has not been enough engagement with women to be involved in peace and peace education and peace processes and in peace practice. And after 10 years, we still have a long way to go to be able to engage women and also youth in formal peace education activities as well as peace processes. So I think for me, the importance here is the linking of very much the linking of an inclusive participatory approach. So in our education activity and also in, of course, in our peace work.
Okay, thank you, Patricia. Thank you for excellent summary of your presentation. I really liked, you mentioned, highlight the two key actors, youth and women. I think they can be the important agent for not only the nexus approach, but also mainstreaming the SDG 16+, meaning the peace, justice, inclusion. Another, for my terminology, is human rights and democracy. So I think this, as you know, the Busan Democracy Forum has been organized not only the civil society COICA, but also we have the education. That's why in the opening ceremony, the superintendent of education, he gave us an opening remark. That means we are also collaborating with the school in terms of the global citizen education and also grassroots democracy activists. So I believe we will continue this providing the forum for exchange of ideas and also experience, and build Busan as a center for action and with all the ideas in the coming decade. So this discussion will continue next session. So we go deeper into UN and UNESCO. So please stay with us for next session. So meanwhile, I want to thank once again the three excellent speakers and all the participants and the staff. Let's give a big hands to everybody. And Hashani, good night. Have a good sleep. See you tomorrow. Okay, thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.